Hey, it's Sandy Peterson, and it's time for Black Goat. Okay, Black Goat starts in West Africa, the city of, or the ruins of Gaharn, where they have their cultists all set up. And their special ability is called Fertility Cult. It's ongoing. What it means is, when anyone else summons a monster, they summon the one monster, they're done, go on to the next phase. But Black Goat can summon multiple monsters from one or several gates of one or more kinds in the same round. So for example, if I was summoning a monster, I'd say, I'll summon a ghoul here and a fungi here. And another fungi here for good measure. There we go. And now you gotta pay for all the monsters, but you can do it all at once. This lets you recover really fast from a disaster, or if someone's killed some of your monsters and they're getting ready to attack you again, before they do, you can get a bunch of things back at once, whereas other factions have to kind of wait to recover. However, cultists aren't monsters, of course, so when you recruit cultists, you only get one at a time. You don't get a bunch of cultists back. He has other features to his faction that make it useful to get a bunch of monsters at once, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So his monsters, let's talk about this thing as he gets all in a hurry like that. He has two ghouls. They have a combat of 0, and initially they have a cost of 1. You only get 2 of these ghouls. Then you have 4 fungi from Yuggoth. They have a combat of 1, and initially they have a cost of 2. I keep saying initially because later on that changes. Then there is the mighty Dark Young. The Dark Young have a combat of 2, and initially costs 3. You have 3 of these. Oh yeah, you have 4 of them you go, so they're your most numerous monster. They're kind of the backbone of your guys. Okay, and you have 1 Shub-Niggurath, your great old one. Now, to summon Shub-Niggurath, you have to have a gate and 2 cultists in the same area. So for example, West Africa is a common place for this. Now what happens is you remove 2 of your cultists, you pay 8 power, and you place Shub-Niggurath. Now, Shub-Niggurath, the cult of Black Goat is pretty much all about killing your own cultists for rewards, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. To summon Shub-Niggurath, you lose 2 cultists. So although it only costs 8 power, he sort of costs 10 power because you have to get the cultists back eventually. Note that, interestingly, this is, besides the King in Yellow, this is the only Great Old One that you can normally summon the very first turn. Now if you do it, it's the only thing you get to do that whole turn, but hey, you got Shub-Niggurath. I would say that my playtesters do this about 30-40% of the time. The rest of the time they do a more normal opening, but there he is. Black Goat right there at the start, a terrifying Great Old One. Now, his combat ability is equal to the total of his gates plus his cultists. So for example, in this situation, if this was the whole map of Black Goat stuff, he would have 4 cultists and 2 gates, so that's a combat of 6. Typically his combat hovers around 7 to 9. It can be lower, it can be higher. His theoretical maximal is 15. I don't think I've ever seen it there. And his minimum can be as low as 1 or 2, so that's not very fun. But usually it's kind of up there around 7 or 8. Combat's not really her main function, unlike some other Great Old Ones. Now her special ability is Avatar, and it's pretty sweet. Let me show you how this works. Let us say that we have some obnoxious player over here with his monsters. The way Avatar works is you pay 1 power, it's an action, you take Shub-Niggurath, and you pick another area with enemy units, and you put him there. And one of the enemy units, chosen by the enemy, has to go and swap places with you. And effectively you exchange places with them. If you do this with an area where they only has 1 enemy, like say there's a cultist all alone here, you go and swap, then the cultist has to go back and live here with, you know, your monsters and stuff and get captured. And hey, you're here, and there's no one around. You can recruit a cultist. And you always have cultists in your pool when you're Shub-Niggurath because they're always dying. So you got kind of... Now, let's say that instead, he has a monster guarding his gate. Now he's safe from you, right? Not exactly, because you swap here, and now he has a choice. Either he sends his Nori over here, leaving the cultist behind to be captured by you and then replaced, or he sends the cultist away, and now now the cultist in danger. If either he saves that cultist, or he's going to recruit a new cultist here, in which case you'll just capture that. No matter what, you can pretty much take the gate. Now there's a little risk because he's out there all alone with bad guys after him, so you have to use this carefully. It's way good in the early game. Later in the game, you have to plan your avatars a little more. In fact, what usually happens in the later game is you have your Shub Niggurath sitting over here kind of hanging out and looking cool, and then suddenly Cthulhu comes to kill you. So on your turn, you avatar away far across the map for 1 point and swap with one of your own units or an enemy's going back there, and those guys can then be there for Cthulhu to worry about while you are gone away. So it becomes an escape route in the late game, but it's a source of attacking and capturing gates in the early game. That's Avatar. Very handy ability. The best Shub Niggurath players, or Black Goat players, can use that to great effect. His spellbooks, or her spellbooks. It's a girl after all. See? If she had eyes, she'd have mascara. Okay, first, have units in 4 areas. You have a number of spellbooks that help you get units in those 4 areas. Basically, if there's 4 areas of Black Goat units, like for example here I have them in 3 areas. If I move this guy here, poof, I got him in 4 areas. I got that spellbook. Second, have units in 6 areas. Works the same, so we gotta have units in 6 areas. Third, have them in 8 areas. This doesn't happen for a while, but eventually you can pull it off. Now, a mistake early beginning players often make is to try to get these 4 or 6 areas on the first or second turn, spreading their guys really thin. When you're spread really thin, then you can get picked off by all the enemies, so I recommend against that. I would recommend building up in a more steady race. Maybe get 4 the second turn, then 6 the next turn, and so forth. Now, another thing is they get a spellbook if they share areas with all enemies. This doesn't mean they have to, let's say you're playing against white, green, and yellow. This doesn't mean you have to be in one area with all 3, okay? It could be like this. Here you have a unit in an area with green, a unit in an area with white, and a unit in an area with yellow. Now you've shared with all areas. Now, one of the advantages of Shub Niggurath is she can often get multiple of her spellbooks at once. So for example, she can go to 6 areas and share with everyone at the same time that gets her 2 spellbooks. Another advantage is that she can often get her spellbooks during an enemy's turn. For example, let's say she gets attacked here, and she gets a couple of pains. Well, she could pain away in such a way as to increase the number of areas she's in, and thus, you know, earn a spellbook. That's pretty handy. I've seen both these things done. Now, the next thing is, as your action, eliminate cultists in 2 areas. So, you can use this even defensively. And this gives you a spellbook. Your action is, I take off 2 cultists, I get a spellbook. So for example, say that it's right here, the King in Yellow has just come, and his plan is obviously to capture your cultists. So on your turn, you could move him out, or try to move Avatar Shub Niggurath there, or something, but instead, you say, hey, you know what, I'm going to get this spellbook, I'll remove 2 cultists. I'll remove this cultist, and this one. There, I get a spellbook, I'm safe from being captured by you, and you can just go hang. So that's another, can be used a lot of different times. I recommend against using this, even though it costs 0 power, and then after that summoning Shub Niggurath on the very first turn, because you end up with only 2 cultists and 1 gate and like almost no power, and that's depressing. So I would recommend splitting those up over a couple turns. Final spellbook, Awaken Shub Niggurath. Everyone gets a spellbook for the Great Old One. Okay, there are spellbooks. First is Frenzy. Your cultists now have a combat of 1. There's a lot of ways this can be handy. Let me give you one. Let's say that the white player here has gloriously got himself a base. It's early in the game. You move a cultist in there. He laughs at your cultist. What are you going to do? And your answer is, I'm declaring combat. You then roll your die. You got a 50% chance of scoring a pain or a kill, in which case he has to retreat or leave, and then you can just walk onto the gate. And that's just a cultist. You know, another use is that when someone comes to attack you, your cultists can attack them back and drive them out. Like you start an area with a couple of cultists, a monster comes in thinking, aha, I'm going to be capturing you guys. Say, I declare combat, I roll 5 dice. You're probably going to leave the monster behind. Even if the enemy is smart enough to come with a few dice, and you have monsters too in that case, then it always adds 1 or 2 dice to the combats you have in any area, and that so it accumulates throughout the course of the game. So Frenzy is a very useful ability. Next, Necrophagy. This is the Ghoul spellbook. Okay, here's what it does. When anyone fights, it can be you even, okay? Let's say we have a combat over here in North America between Yellow Sign and Cthulhu, okay? At the end of the fight, after all the damage is done, you can move a ghoul from the map into the fight area, or 2 ghouls. For each ghoul you move in, each side in the fight gets an additional pain. So for example, let's say there was a fight here, and Yellow Sign managed to pain away the ghoul and didn't take any damage. You then use Necrophagy pop in the ghoul, the Shoggoth. You pop in your ghoul, and the yellow sign takes an additional pain. They have to pain out the Byakhee or the king. Either way, they're sad. And you also got your ghoul in a new area, and sometimes, quite often what happens is there'll be a big fight somewhere, and all the cultists will be driven away, and then your ghoul will pop in, and hey look, you have a ghoul in the area with an empty gate, and you can summon your own cultist there and take it over. You can do it even if you're in the fight. So for example, here's a fight between you and Yellow Sign, and at the end of the fight, like, you know, your guy's driven out, and he's not driven out, but then, because they came to fight you, he kicks your guys out of the area. Well, you have necrophagy, so a ghoul who wasn't in the fight teleports there, pains one of his guys out, and you retain the area. So you're really hard to uproot from an area. You're like a fungus infection. They can't get rid of you. You can always move a ghoul back in and take it over. And ghouls are very cheap, so you don't really care if they get killed. Okay. Necrophagy. Groth. Groth is more of a mid to late game ability, and it's the one that you get for your amigo. The way it's an action, it costs 2 power. The way it works is you count out how many areas you have fungi in. So for example, if this was your layout, you have a fungi in 3 areas. If you also had a 4th fungus like this, you still only have them in 3 areas. So you need to spread out to use this ability. Okay? You roll a die. If you roll higher than the number of areas where you have fungi, you get nothing. You just blew 2 power and got nothing for it. But if you roll equal to or less than the number of areas where you have funguses, then that is the number of cultists the enemies have to lose between them. So say you had these 3 areas, or say you had 4 areas, usually you wait till you have 4, sometimes with 3, you roll a 3. Your enemy players now have to lose 3 cultists between them. Okay? They have 1 minute to decide how they want to lose it. You may think to yourself, this sounds a little bit about like Nyarlathotep's 1,000 Forms ability. And it is a little bit like it, with 2 differences. First is, you can keep doing it again and again because it costs you 2 power each time. And second, if they can't agree on who should take the losses, then you get to pick for them. So if they argue each other and no one can agree how to take the hits, you say, well, I think I want Yellow Sign to take all 3 deaths, or I want Yellow Sign to take 2 and Cthulhu to take 1, or whatever kind of split up you need. If you do a number of Groth, you can have there's kind of a whole Groth strategy where you focus on trying to Groth the enemies into extinction. And then they have to spend their whole next turn getting back to their cultists that you've Grothed away. So it's sometimes also the players can tell who you actually intend to kill with Groth. Like they're sitting there saying, well, Cthulhu's got the most Doom points, or whoever it is. It says, he's not going to get me, I refuse to lose any cultists to Groth. And then when it's your turn, you can then inflict all the losses on Cthulhu. And, or not, depending on how big of a pain you want to be to them. So that's Groth. It's Death Center above, kills units without you having to go to combat. And since you don't actually have any combat abilities, I mean you have Necrophagy, but that's really post-combat, and it's not even your fights usually when you use it, so you're not really a combat thing. Next, one of the best spellbooks in the whole game is the spellbook for the Dark Young. It's not combat, it's called the Red Sign, and what it does is, it lets these monsters occupy gates like a cultist, build gates like a cultist, and give you 1 power during Gather Power like a cultist. They're not a cultist in other ways. For example, they can't be captured like a cultist, that kind of, any spellbooks that affect cultists don't affect them. So now, one common way it's done is, let's say you have a cultist here and you summon a Dark Young. Here he is. You pay your money for the Dark Young, he's in the area. If you have a Red Sign, you could actually summon the Dark Young right on top of the base, like the gate, like that. And your cultist hops off, put him on. Now he's guarding the gate. One of the reasons this is really useful is because a Dark Young guarding the gate, even if he's all alone, he can't be captured. He's not a cultist, right? And he's immune to things such as Cthulhu's dreams, because, again, not a cultist. So, one of my sons likes to do the thing of summoning a Dark Young in an area, like this, and then marching it into the adjacent area and have him building the gate. So the Dark Young lets you keep a significant footprint on the map with lots of gates, even when your cultist numbers is kind of low, because you kill them to summon Shub-Niggurath, you kill them to get your spell books, and you kill them with one of the other spell books we're going to talk about right now, which is Blood Sacrifice. If Shub-Niggurath is in play during the Doom phase, you pick up one of your cultists, kill him, and you get an Elder Sign. So basically every Doom phase that you have that spell book, you're killing a cultist to get an Elder Sign, so you get an extra Elder Sign every Doom phase, which is pretty nice. And there's another reason that you're glad you have the Dark Young to take over the gates for you, because your cultists are constantly being dead. I've seen Black Goat knocked down to only his 3 Dark Young and gates, but that's not too bad, because it's still worth 9 power for him. And he can start recruiting the cultists again and get more stuff done. Okay, his last spellbook is for Shub-Niggurath, and this is the spellbook that is very often picked, the very first one when you summon him. And what it is what? Her, sorry. The 1,000 Young. And what it is, if Shub-Niggurath is in play, ghouls, fungi, and Dark Young cost 1 less power each to summon. That means ghouls cost 0. Fungi cost 1. And Dark Young only cost 2. That's a bargain. And remember that this means you can summon every single monster you have in your entire pile for just 10 power. All at once. Also, you can trickle it out. For example, let's say that you aren't sure what to do, you want to delay decisions. Well, round 1, summon 1 ghoul, cost you 0. You don't spend any power, you wait and watch. Then the other way to do things. Then round 2, you summon another ghoul, cost you 0. Sit there and watch. Round 3, maybe you do the get the spellbook where you sacrifice 2 cultists and pay nothing, or whatever. Now, another use for the ghouls is whenever you take their cheap hits in combat. For example, remember Cthulhu has the Devour ability before combat? Ghouls were born to be the guy you pick for your Devour, because they cost 0, so... And you kind of like it when they're killed, because then you have them available to resummon for nothing. And that's really great. So you have cheap monsters, you can get lots of them. They're not all about combat, they're all about other functions. You do have some, I guess I said he had no combat abilities, but really he has one. He has the Frenzy, whereas cultists are worth 1 in combat. So, for example, here in this area, if this was your layout on the whole map for Shub-Niggurath, he has 1, 2, 3, 4 cultists, 2 gates, that's worth 6 dice. He has 1 more for this, he's worth 6. 7 for that, and then you have 4 cultists, or 3 cultists, 7, 8, 9. That's 10 dice in that area. Plus you have a free ghoul to get killed if someone comes to fight you. That's actually a pretty decent defense. So there's Shub-Niggurath, avataring around the map, Grothing from above. You're having monsters that are impossible to get out of the area because they keep popping in, or they're Dark Young that can't be captured, or they're Necrothian ghouls. And they're so cheap to get back. You go in there and kill a bunch of those monsters, next turn they're all there again. It's really obnoxious. And that is Shub-Niggurath.